Welcome back to I'm Glad You're Here. This episode is a conversation with Meg Lear, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in California and works with psychedelic-assisted therapy and integration. Meg is all about the integrative approach to trauma therapy, and she dives into her personal journey that expands on her why, as well as her journey that's brought us to where she is today, which is now her private practice that weaves in ketamine-assisted therapy. There are so many beautiful moments in this discussion on what healing looks like. And a lot of Meg's approach and background is informed by lucid dreaming, art therapy, tantric yoga, Buddhism, meditation, and flow states. I hope you enjoy this creative approach to healing, and let's get on to the episode. Yeah. Meg, welcome to I'm Glad You're Here. It's so good that we finally worked this out. How are you doing today?
Thanks. I'm doing great today, actually. Today was like the first day of the week. I know I started it on Friday, but today was the first day of the week that I actually got to do my full like Ayurvedic like self-care like morning rituals. So yeah, I'm feeling exceptional today.
Wait, that's incredible. Can you tell me more? Yeah. Are you doing like the self-oil massage and like a ghee thing?
Yep. What, exactly. Yeah. So wake up in the morning and do a little bit of stretching, tongue scraping, spray my eyes with rose water, pull with oil, and then full body massage with sesame oil.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's incredible. That's good.
And then I don't have tea until like 11.
Yeah. That sounds so beautiful. And I know we've mentioned this before. I'll share it as we're recording that you just took off with your private practice. So it's so exciting to see that you get your morning ritual, you get to do the things you love and take up space the way that you want to and just fully own it. And so, okay, kicking off with the intention for this conversation. My intention here is to share these creative and beautiful ways to heal from trauma. I know that you're quite open about your journey and you practice therapy, psychedelic-assisted therapy, worked with ketamine, and art therapy. So these modalities and how that kind of takes shape in healing trauma.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. My intention today is definitely just to share a little bit about my story, where the journey has taken me, and I'm really also just like always about empowerment. So I hope for whoever ends up listening to this that a little bit of it at least will inspire them to to start nurturing a practice of self-care and self-exploration.
I love that.
You can do it.
Yes, you can do it. And the self-care is huge. And thank you for calling that out. It's also a big reason why I felt called to have this conversation with you, because we're in a group chat of a To Be Magnetic group. That's a lot of it's Lacey Phillips' concept of manifestation and really just working through a lot of trauma, a lot of past experiences, and really manifesting your own life, getting creative with it. And so just having you in that group, in that space, we kind of speak a lot of the same language. And I figured, we should have this conversation on self-care and growth. You got this. And so let's start with, I'd love for you to give us your story, however you'd like to. And we'll go with that.
Well, I have always considered myself an artist long before I ever knew what art therapy was. I was absolutely using it in a therapeutic sense. I've never been a professional artist. Like, I don't sell my artwork. It's always been for me. And I consider it all like deeply symbolic of subconscious. When I was 17 years old, I went through a major trauma. I was kidnapped at gunpoint. That is really kind of like the beginning of, me taking some serious and conscious steps on the path of recovery and healing. So it was my first year of undergraduate work, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And very classically, I, kind of drug my heels going to therapy. I was living in Tahoe at the time because I'm a huge skier. Like, all I wanted to do then, and all I want to do now is really just ski. I sometimes feel like I started my own business just so that I could start skiing midweek.
Just be a ski bum.
Just be a ski bum, professional ski bum, please. Yeah. Yeah. So I really hit a crossroads at age 17 and 18. That year was really hard. And my mom, I grew up in the Central Valley of California. I was on the phone with my mom almost every evening at like 3 a.m. I was struggling with night terrors and then subsequently insomnia as a result of the night terrors because I was so scared of going to sleep and falling back into my reoccurring dream that my mom, she's really great at holding boundaries. And she confronted me one day and she was like, look, Meg, like, I love you. But I can't keep doing these 3 a.m. phone calls. And I don't know what needs to happen, but if you're going to stay in Tahoe, we've got to, get you set up with a therapist. And of course, you're always welcome to come home and we can support you from here. I really didn't want to move back to the Central Valley. So I started working with a therapist and very quickly realized that the kidnapping was just the beginning of the trauma. And I write on my website and, speak to all of my clients how trauma kind of has a way of doing that. Like you come in and you're like, okay, like I'm just here to work on, my divorce or the death of my.
Let's just do that, please. And that just unravels.
Exactly right. It is. It's like pulling a thread. And grief has a way of touching all of our other grief stories. So I was so grateful to find who I consider to be one of the world's greatest therapists. She really held space and helped me to see that emotional upheaval that I was going through was actually kind of creating this like chain reaction and how it was helping me to see all of the other traumas that hadn't really been brought to light or acknowledged or healed. So, psychotherapy was my first step. She also introduced me to art therapy and dream work. She taught me how to lucid dream, which was a huge and very pivotal moment. Yeah.
Great therapist. Yeah.
Great therapist.
Lucky.
Yeah. She actually did not know how to lucid dream herself also, which I thought was fascinating, but she went out of her way. I think she saw how gung-ho and ready I was. And so she did a lot of research and provided me with so many different resources on dream yoga and the practice of natural light. And then, of course, Jungian dream work as well. And so I had always been a very vivid dreamer up until the kidnapping. And then once the kidnapping happened, it was just like all really like dark, ominous, very scary dreams.
Can you explain a little bit about lucid dreaming or yoga dreaming too, just for listeners on how that helped and what that healing tool was?
Yeah. So, dream yoga and the practice of natural light. I always have this book nearby.
There we go.
Yeah. This teacher, his name is Namkhai Norbu. He's a Tibetan teacher. And I love his name so much. Norbu means jewel and Namkhai means of the sky.
Oh,
so his name translated means jewel of the sky. But yeah, to me, in a nutshell, dream yoga is really about, looking at like the karmic patterns of your dreams, and dream states and, the Jungian would kind of call this like more like archetypes, but in Tibetan, right? Like, everything is about karma. And so a lot of what his guidance helped me with was not only empowering me to bring more consciousness into the dream realm, but also start really kind of unpacking, okay, is this a karmic tie from something that has happened in this life, right? Like, is it directly related to the kidnapping or is this something from a past life?
Okay, so a couple thoughts. One, just knowing meditation, sound healing, subconscious work, getting to that dreamlike state helps us create those new neural pathways, reinforce new behaviors. So I can see, okay, lucid dreaming, you're adding a little bit of consciousness to this space. So awareness, so you're kind of present with these thought patterns. How does that awareness help us work through? Like, what does it do to know this was from the past versus present?
One of my biggest battles, actually, in life in general, I have all of these questions, and I've pursued all of these, right? Like, very curious person over here, and with that, like all of our curiosity takes the shape of questions, and I feel like I've entered into every domain of life, spirituality, psychology, even philosophy. I married a philosopher, and I think a lot of that was just like, oh, great, he can help me get answers. And does he? No, absolutely not.
It just generates more questions, I bet, being married to it.
That is exactly right. There are very few answers in the field of philosophy. I'm really great at coming up with more questions, though. And basically, yeah, I in many ways have had to reconcile myself to that. And like learning to kind of lean into the mystery, and like that Roca quote, learning to live the questions. So I didn't actually find any answers, in terms of like really being able to nail down, okay, like this is from this life. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe the biggest gift that it gave me was just some confidence in being able to, develop that courage that I really needed. Many of my dreams, especially at that time, were very like persecutory in nature. So almost always I'm like being pursued by somebody, almost always a baddie, right? And I need to escape, or I need to hide, or I need to run away. And so a big part of my healing process has been not running away.
Wow.
And figuring out how to turn towards this thing that I am perceiving as my enemy. And so frequently it's not my enemy.
Yeah.
And the Jungians also say that you are all elements of the dream. So when we run, you're running from you.
Yeah. That's so powerful. And just hearing this type of work, it's so evident to me how dedicated you've been to your healing journey. And so just applauding your work, just in awe. It's so beautiful. It's hard. And like we said in the beginning, you start at the tip of the iceberg. You start with a traumatic experience, but we have these karmic patterns. We have these past lives. If whoever's listening believes that. So again, that running away, it's, these things won't heal themselves. Maybe it's not about knowing exactly when it comes from, but that just bridges awareness. And then that helps us relate to it and maybe see it in a different way, in a healing, loving way. Wow. So that's really cool. So at that point, so you're working with your therapist, and she's incredible, didn't know that much about lucid dreaming, but goes out and hunts it down and provides you this tool. So now you start this kind of conscious awareness in your sleep. So you're able to be present for these traumatic dreams. You're able to reframe things, work with it, rather than just be this victim that receives these horrible situations. And I'm curious. So then what happens in your story?
Yeah. So to be fair, although I was making a lot of really good headway in the dream realm, my waking life was still a disaster. I mean, I'm in many ways shocked that I was able to make it through school. I mean, it is solely because of the support of my family and my friends at that time that I was able to make it through. Because at that time, I was still actively working with the DA's office, giving my testimony and preparing to go to trial. So anyone who has been the victim of a violent crime can tell you that our justice system is absolutely not set up to protect the ones that have been the survivors. It was brutal. And even though I was making some really good, I was creating a lot of like emotional stability in the dream and in my dream life. Above in the waking world, I was really struggling with emotional regulation, codependency in my relationships. And, it was college. So also just substance abuse. A lot of what I was doing at that time, when I was awake, was still very much aimed at kind of numbing from the pain. But also, I will say that a lot of that experimental phase that I think many of us go through in college, including drug use, is also what led me to psychedelics. And so at that point, I think, I started attending regular yoga and meditation classes the same year that I was given a very large dose of MDMA. And nothing was the same ever again. Everything changed. I think, most psychonauts will also tell you that there is a very strong overlap between the psychedelic experience and the dream. In both, right? Like the subconscious is often expressing itself through the language of symbolism, of imagery, and of metaphor.
Were you in a meditative setting in that experience? Were you out and about? I'm curious about that experience with MDMA.
Yeah. It was pretty much the best situation you could have hoped for. It was being done recreationally, but we were at, a very familiar location, our set and setting. I was amongst my closest friends. It was a very small, intimate group. We had the house to ourselves, an acre of nature out and around behind us. Yeah. Looking back on it, all three of us were actually, going through some pretty big stuff. emotionally speaking, related to our families. And, I was with my partner at the time who we were kidnapped together. And so a lot of what happened that evening was just this beautiful opening of this space for deep soul work, just asking and getting that support that we needed. It was the first time that I had ever really actually felt all of those defense mechanisms like really crumble inside of me. I felt a level of openness that was completely novel and new to me.
Wow.
Even though I had been in amazing therapy sessions, nothing compared to this.
So were you studying psychology at the time? What were you studying? What were you doing? Because you get hit with this super soul experience.
Yeah, I was a history major, pre-law minor. So
Interesting.
I was studying history because I love a good story. And I'm also a big fan of writing. So yeah, history was just like this beautiful opportunity for me to like study and read and do all the writing that I wanted. And the pre-law was motivated from the kidnapping subconsciously, right? Of course. But yeah, I kind of have a little bit of in the Enneagram, I'm a number 8. And so that personality type is called the challenger. And I have been told my whole life since about age 7 or 8, man, you'd make a great lawyer. And then obviously getting kidnapped and being on the unfortunate end, of the legal system and just being, feeling like I was being dragged through the mud. I had this real need to enact vengeance. And I thought that that's what I was going to be doing. I thought I was going to be this criminal lawyer and that I was always going to defend the innocent. And that's just not, that's not really how it works. And MDMA actually really showed me that.
So we're Meg. We are studying history, we're pre-law. You have this experience. Do you keep up this study? Do you continue in history and law? Do you graduate with that?
Yeah, it was pretty dramatic. I was a week away from taking the LSATs.
Oh my gosh.
I had all of my letters of recommendation. I was going to law school. And then this trip happened. And in it, a quick summary of what happened in the vision, because it's pretty important. Yeah. MDMA was essentially kind of showing me, I had a couple of moments to myself. And so, I was practicing yoga and meditation at the time, and I kind of just went inward, building that muscle of interoception and paying attention to my inner world. And MDMA actually showed me, I kind of was like in this like temporal loop where I was watching myself as a lawyer, and I was in the courtroom and I was facing case after case after case. So, I would like show up to work wearing a new outfit, but it was like the same person every time. And that was kind of like the moment of like, why am I doing this? And the first thing that came up is to get even. And then at that point, there was just this huge, like, we call it like breakdown or breakthrough moment, right? Where it was like, okay, I can't unsee that now. Yeah. Like I'm about to devote all of this energy, right? Like my precious life force and all of these financial resources, like from my family, from, financial aid, like everything, out of a need to get even. And so then the more I sat with that, the more I was like, I absolutely cannot go through with this. And so the following day,
oh my gosh,
which by the way, I just like, for anyone out there who's been in a similar situation, like, I just don't recommend this. Like, take a couple of days. Like, I was still very much acting impulsively, but the following day I went to my parents' house and I said, I'm not going to law school. And they said, okay, so what are you going to do instead? And I responded, I'm not totally sure, but I know it's going to involve making art and eating psychedelics.
Oh, nice. Yep.
Every parent's nightmare. Every parent's nightmare.
They're like, oh no. That's so funny. Oh my goodness.
I wasn't like totally cut off, but they were like, we're not contributing or supporting that. So you're on your own. Like, let us know. So yeah, I moved back up to Tahoe, and then I just entered the community college there and took all the art classes I possibly could and all the psych classes I possibly could. And that's when I found art therapy as a field.
I want to pause for a second and go back to MDMA, and because you mentioned the breakthrough, you mentioned, maybe not following a trip going and changing based off of everything that comes up. So I'd love if you can quickly kind of explain what's happening. I know MDMA is an amygdala cutoff, so we feel a lot of love, a lot of
Yeah.
serotonin. But in terms of the processing, in terms of the integration, can you just touch on that briefly for those that
Yeah.
are listening and curious?
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up because that is precisely what I was not doing. I think maybe the most important thing that I can say here is that psychedelics they are not the answer in and of themselves. They can show you alternatives, right? They can show you, parts of yourself that have been hidden. But the real wisdom is actually in figuring out how to integrate that information. Etymologically speaking, like integration means bringing the parts together to make a whole. So this
Wow.
really is a game of piecing together the puzzles of self, right? Of your own consciousness. And it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time. I think that's the thing that nobody very few people really seem to want to honor. When we grow up in cultures where we just have everything handed to us whenever we want them, actually having to sit with your pain and figure out how to, not just think your way through a problem, but also like let that information kind of percolate, right? And like get it down into the somatics. Like, what does this lesson feel like?
Yeah, I'm really grateful you just said that too, because of course this is your story. This is how, it starts to work out for you. But pausing on that one, so we have this concept of microdosing and bigger trips and journeys. And microdosing, subperceptive. So we can get behind this incremental change over time. When it comes to a bigger journey, you're like, oh, so all my problems get zapped away, right? Because I'm diving in, so I get to see it all. And I love that you said the integration, the part of choosing and how that shows up, because I'll share a personal experience with MDMA. I was in this women's circle, so beautiful, so loving, so healing. And I had this beautiful idea to change my last name to my mom's maiden name. And everyone's like, yes, amazing, do it. Oh my gosh. I get home, I tell my boyfriend, this is so cool. I'm going to do it. It's going to be amazing. And immediately he's like, well, wouldn't your dad be hurt? And that feels like a big legal thing. And da 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 da. And all of that is to say, was the solution changing my last name to my mom's maiden name? Or was it, integrating what that meant for me and understanding my relationships to those people and my identity, my name? So just wanted to call that out, that it's really beautiful how you said the integration is the collecting of the pieces of your soul, the pieces of your story, understanding how that fits in our human plane, because a psychedelic is an altered state of consciousness. So we're looking at a lens that's kind of different than our day-to-day life. And sometimes like, oh, that problem just doesn't exist anymore. And then you're done. You're like, yeah, that person doesn't bother me, doesn't trigger me anymore. And sometimes it's a deeper understanding of the world. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I live in Nevada City, we have a pretty healthy psychedelic community.
Yeah, why
here.
Is that? I've noticed that. Where did that come from?
Burners, I think. I mean, also just hippies. Like, it's kind of
collect.
One of these. Yeah, exactly. They really do. I mean, I lived in Santa Cruz before that, and it was the same there. But I see a lot of people here in my area that, I see people consuming ayahuasca ceremony after ceremony after ceremony. And, there's always this like big, powerful shift where they feel something that's different. But inevitably, when you are not emphasizing the importance of integration and you're just going and you're dipping back into the ceremony piece, you're failing to complete the most important part from my perspective, which is that taking of intentional action based on your new insights. We're talking about behavior change, right? Like you can't think your way into a new life.
Wow. You can't think your way into a new life. That's, and thank you again for that dipping into spirituality. And this is the podcast. I'm glad you're here. The whole concept is, but we're still human. And we'll still get pissed off at the person driving next to us, at our partner for saying something. So it's how do we dip into spirituality to start to heal these things, to have new relationships with it. It isn't to be the next messiah and to be the healer of all and the master of everything. It's to have the best human experience you can have.
Ram Dass says something very similar. Yeah, I'm sure you are familiar with Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, one of the founders of psychedelic research. He, in his older years, was confronted in one of his talks by one of his students asking about his current use of psychedelics, and he was really honest and was just like, "Yeah, I do them, every so often." But I've, the deeper down the spiritual path he got, he kind of more or less states that the need for them decreased. And that now when he does them, he does it, or he did it as a way of kind of gauging where he's at in his own spiritual practice, which I just loved.
So cool.
Loved
so cool.
that. Yeah.
Wow. I love that too. Yeah, that's great. I love the quote by him, "We're all just walking each other home."
One of my favorites.
A really powerful one. Yeah. Every time I say it, I'm like, ooh, I feel it. I
can see it wash over you. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I was like, should I say it? It's going to make me feel a certain way, but I did it.
Absolutely.
Super powerful. So now we've covered that. I feel good. Actually, I want to ask, so can you speak more about that breakthrough?
The breakthrough moment?
Yes.
Yeah. So, actually, if you don't mind, I'll kind of maybe like relate it to how I do integration with people now.
Yeah, totally.
So when folks come to me for psychedelic integration, I always tell them that I kind of work with this like 3-step process where step 1 is we are unearthing, right? Like we are trying to kind of get down to determine, right, what the dominant theme or what the core message of the experience is. Step 2 is that transformation piece. So again, right, like looking at how to take those insights and identify strategies for turning those insights right into well thought out decisions and actionable steps. And that is really like an effort, right? It's an exercise of prioritization. And then step 3 is, I call it crystallization, where you're working on crystallizing the wisdom that you're gaining through embodied practices and rituals. That has been like my hard one, kind of like, this is how it's done. When I reflect back and I look at the original breakthrough moment, I think I did a really good job of unearthing, and that's about where it stopped.
giving little Meg some compassion, but
absolutely. I think that, and this is something that I try to give to my my clients a lot in therapy as well, is like when we're stuck, we are so eager to hurry up and do something. That anxiety, whether it's actually related to anxiety or maybe depression, there's a certain kind of desperation that can really make us act irrationally. And so, the breakthrough, when I look back, I was spot on, like, intuitively, like that is exactly what needed to happen. And when I reflect, even deeper and I think about my life now and how different things would have been if I had gone down the academic road to law school, like, I think my adrenals would be in fatigue. I think, I probably wouldn't have found my husband. I probably wouldn't know how to be in a healthy relationship with myself or really anyone else. I think I would have given my whole self to my career and probably sacrificed so many beautiful opportunities.
Wow. Yeah. That intuitive understanding and being able to integrate those lessons
now,
huge,
right?
Huge. And that was my segue back, because I'm dying to know how this shakes out. So, I guess I know the end result, but okay. So now community college, and you're taking art classes and psychology classes.
So I finished up my education, undergrad education at LTCC. Beautiful, great college. Highly recommend it. Completely surrounded by pine trees, which was absolutely what I really needed. Yeah, I needed some fresh air and big trees. I took all the psych and all the art and then applied to my graduate program, Notre Dame de Namur, for art therapy. Actually, technically, I applied for clinical psych first, but that was only because the art therapy program didn't have neurophys psychopharm. And I really wanted to get the brain science. So I applied to the clinical psych program. And then after I did all the courses on the brain and drugs, then I transferred to the art therapy program.
It's so cool how you're drawn to extract the knowledge that you're seeking, just constantly like I need to learn that. I'm going to piece that. I'm going to get that here. Then I'm just going to keep pursuing.
Yeah.
I love how you're owning the academic space. That's just like, oh, here's your major. Here you go. That's what you study. And you're like,
Mhm.
I'm going to survey the things that work and then I'm going to make it mine. Really
Yeah.
powerful.
I think, yeah, that wasn't my initial plan, but it was after my first semester, one of our professors was gone. And so one of the art therapy professors was taking over for her. And so we went to a completely different place on campus. And I walked into the art therapy, like office space for the first time. And everything, I mean, it was wall to wall artwork, collage,
Wow.
painting, sculpture, everything. I mean, like I was surrounded by color and
Happiness,
symbols and
joy.
just like, okay, art therapy.
Like, okay, done. I see it. I get it. Like, thank you, universe. Got it.
This is where I need to be. Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. And with art therapy, what types of mediums do you practice? What types of mediums do your clients practice? What does that look
Mhm.
like?
Yeah, so that actually has changed a lot in the last couple of years. I, as a child, was taught oil painting, and so I have the most knowledge in oil painting and really just in painting in general. But as I got into grad school, I started working a lot more with photography, and now I kind of do a little bit of everything. One of my favorite things to bring in, and this is actually a great art therapy directive to do with folks that are a little apprehensive about art therapy. There's a lot of misconceptions. Many people come in and they're like, oh, that's for kids. They don't necessarily understand that art therapy's emphasis is more on the creative process itself than the finished product. And so,
I'm so happy you just said that because even as a student,
mhm,
when we talk about art therapy, they're showing us clips of kids that can't process their
yeah.
emotions and feelings. And I'm like, I've taken ceramics. I'm not very good, but wheel pan ceramics. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how
So
much of a
fun.
meditation it is. I had no
Yeah,
idea. So I go
exactly.
in, I'm like, I'm going to make a dinner set. Obviously, I'm going to have all my dishes handmade. It's going to be amazing. And I was deeply, deeply humbled. Still
Yeah.
am. Um, but even that experience alone, every step of it, I was just like, oh my God, I need to
Mhm.
let go.
Mhm.
I can't have these expectations. I need to adjust with the clay. Like just lesson
Yeah.
after lesson.
Yeah.
When you're open to receiving it, art is one big
There for
metaphor.
you. Right. Exactly.
Yes. And there for you. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So today, I practice something called somatic art therapy, which is kind of a blend
Ooh.
of like trauma informed yoga plus art therapy. It's really just a blend of movement, embodiment, right? Body awareness, mindfulness with the creative process as a way of kind of externalizing pain. And one of my favorite things to do is soul collage, but we also do painting and drawing to music,
Oh my
mandalas,
God.
sculpting. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so this is working with a client one on
Mhm.
one. Is it ever like couples, individuals? Who's the client you work with? And when they are seeking working with you, are they looking, oh, because she does art therapy? Or do you assess, art therapy is a great tool to implement here?
Most of the folks that I work with right now, I'm doing a lot of individual work. But most of that is because I've been, the longer I do this and the more I kind of like develop the niche,
Mhm.
the more I just have started to see that one-on-one trauma therapy is really like where my heart and soul is. And no
Mhm.
surprise, because that's also me. Like
Yeah.
that's where I was. And so, yeah, when I have someone that comes in, I mostly work with individuals, and a lot of them are also women. I've spent a lot of time working with women doing domestic violence, sexual assault work, and substance use. But a big piece of trauma informed work, right, is that like it needs to be done in collaboration. There has to be buy-in, and like folks need to feel safe. Like
Yeah.
safety is really the foundation of all good healing work. So when I have someone that comes in, I'm always kind of like laying things out for them. And, sometimes that does look like art therapy and sometimes it doesn't. But the important thing is that it's client led. So, especially if there's, if we're doing psychedelic work together, art therapy is just so helpful for integration and for helping folks to make sense of what's happening in the psychedelic experience, similarly to, right, like what's happening in the dream realm as well. Like so frequently it can be extremely enigmatic and confusing and even scary. And so I'll make suggestions of like, hey, like, I wonder what it would be like to draw that or to paint that. But honestly, a lot of what I'm doing in session is a blend of kind of everything. That includes attachment, polyvagal stuff, internal family systems, dream work obviously comes in a lot. And then flow theory. Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, all the juicy terms. And so I guess something I want to ask is, let's say someone's listening and they've been through a traumatic experience or they're holding a lot of grief and there's a lot of fear and opening up and maybe thinking, they might be thinking, I'm not ready to do therapy. I don't want to talk about it. Like, I'm curious how we can talk about these tools as ways that do feel approachable, like why these tools are useful for people working with grief and trauma.
On my website, you can read, but I more or less kind of say that like trauma is one of these things that leaves an imprint on the whole self. And then, you know, in our attempts to kind of cope and like get on with it and like move on with our lives, those attempts can actually leave us feeling more disconnected and more separate from our bodies, from our emotions. And ultimately, if we're separate from our body and from our emotions, we're going to feel separate from our community, right? From the people and the things that we love. And so recovering from trauma is similar to this art, right? This Japanese art of kintsukuroi. And I love it so much because this tradition is not only, right, is there no attempt to hide the damage, but instead the repair that's being made is actually, it's a combination, right, of lacquer and of dusted gold, silver, or platinum. So instead of hiding what's been broken, it's actually illuminated with precious metal. And I feel like that just works so well because when we're healing, especially with the deep stuff, especially with the repetitive stuff that happened in childhood, it can really feel like we just want to cut that part off of us or out from inside of us. And I have tried it and I have watched other people try this over and over again. It does not work. And I mean this wholeheartedly and honestly, the only way out is through. I have to find ways of working to understand, accept, and then ultimately, right, like the goal is to love all parts of who we are. And this is really what I think integrative trauma therapy is about. Integrative trauma therapy is what you're talking about, right? We're not just going to talk about CBT and DBT. Like, yes, we care about cognitions and I want to know about all of those cognitive distortions that are coming up, but you're not just a floating head, right? Like you also have this beautiful body and something even beyond that no one really fully understands, which is your spirit. And integrative trauma therapy to me is that, right? It is a collection of modalities that is considerate of an individual's not only physical, but psychological and spiritual health in a unified way. They're dynamic explorations aimed at reestablishing that kind of like ground of being, which is safety in the body.
Yeah, it's really giving me that holistic approach that we really lack a lot in our Western society. And because we're not just a mind, we're not just a body, we're not just a soul, we're all of those parts and they all store and remember differently. They all want to be heard and they all want to be integrated. And something with, is it kintsugi? How do I say it?
Yeah, kintsugi is the abbreviation and kintsukuroi is the,
Okay, beautiful. And so I wanted to ask, because this is all out of memory, because I've seen some of these sculptures, but let's say I start with a mug and then that mug is shattered and I'm repairing it. Do I end with an entirely different looking piece? Or am I piecing together all the elements that make that mug again?
I love that you're asking this question. I really went down on a rabbit hole of this whole process because as I was writing about it, I've always wanted to take a course on this and I've never taken one. But I will share with you everything that I've read. The most important part of this art form is that all pieces must be kept exactly as they are.
Oh my,
Which is
I
just
felt
like,
that.
okay, so symbolic, right? It's like,
Beautiful. You found a good
uh,
metaphor. You found a really
right.
good metaphor.
I really had to sit with it. But yeah, all pieces must be kept exactly as they are. You can't shave them down. You can't continue to chip away or change them. Because if you do, then when you go to apply the adhesive to tape them back together, to glue them back together, they won't
They
hold.
won't fit or they won't
They
hold.
won't fit. Exactly. Exactly. So all your
Wow.
broken pieces must be integrated.
Absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
okay, but then again, that
hmm
overall, because I have my pieces,
hmm
but is my end result to create new art or to create, like obviously it's new, it's different, it's integrated. Am
hmm
I emulating the mug that once was, or am I just taking the pieces and seeing how they fit again,
hmm
totally without connecting the image of the mug?
Yeah, I think it's a new piece because how could you ever be the same?
Hmm.
But also, to kind of bring in another modality, internal family systems, one of the things that I love so much about IFS, right, is that
Hmm.
we are coming into relationship. The whole thing is about coming into relationship with these parts, right?
Yeah.
Exploring our wounded parts, our protective, our suppressant parts, the those folks inside of us that are working really hard to self-sabotage. And we are trying to unburden them as a means of connecting, right, with our core self. Sometimes we get there by contacting the inner healer, the inner child. But I think you're different. I think I was
Yeah.
different. For me, like what this has been about is, and I was actually just talking to my husband about this earlier this morning. When you have complex PTSD, and especially if you grew up in complex environments or chaotic environments, being faced with conflict and choosing to do something healthy is really hard.
Yeah.
It's not
Right.
that
Why
we
would you
don't
want to?
it's not that we don't want to, it's that we
Mm.
have no frame of reference of how to do that. Throwing
Mm.
dishes and storming out of the house is so much easier because that's what I've always done.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, yeah, early in our relationship, I remember like my husband and I would get in fights and he would be like, "Do you want to take a deep breath? Like, do you want to take some deep breaths together?" And
You're like,
internally, I would
no.
be like, "Fuck you." And no.
That's so funny. Oh my
And
God.
now,
Wow.
I look back at that and I'm like, my
Yeah.
little, I call her, she's my fire sign, my little inner teenager inside, my like rebel who like knows what's good and what's healthy and probably like long term what the right solution is. And then instead, like she just wants to burn it all to the ground.
Oh yeah. It's so funny you said that because I'm also blessed with a partner who's always been maybe let's just take a breath.
Secure attachment.
Absolutely. And I so vividly, actually, my mind was like, that sounds so good, but I'm very trapped and I can't do that. I can only do what is known, which is he
Mhm.
told me to take a breath. I'm gonna yell even louder. Now I'm livid. Now he's more mature than me. Now I'm gonna ramp it up, and this is never gonna end. He's gonna regret ever asking me to take a breath. I did a weekend yoga nidra teacher training, and that was really beautiful. I came back
Yeah.
from the first day, like, Elon, let's just take a breath. And he's like, are you kidding me? I mean, he did it, of course. And then he's like, I've always been asking if we could just take a breath. I'm like, I know, but now I get it. Now I'm here with you. Now we're on the same page. And I'm so fortunate that you've always been that champion of taking breaths. I definitely would not have found that yoga nidra training or that practice without him. But it was just funny when I came to it because I remember
Yeah.
always hating being asked that. I'm like, I don't want to. How else am I going to maintain this rage if you're asking me to calm down? So yes, it's very,
Right.
very hard to choose the unlearned behavior
hmm
and to constantly choose that until it's reinforced.
I love that you just said, how am I going to maintain that rage? Can we just pause there for a second?
Yeah.
I think that this is maybe one of the most important things that a trauma survivor can hear.
Mm,
Rage and anger is so much safer than
wow.
sadness and grief and fear. There's a phenomenal book, by the way. It's called Getting to Zero by Jason Gaddis. How to navigate conflict in your high stakes relationship. I cannot recommend this book enough. But it was in reading that book that I kind of started really feeling into how much I hide and have hidden in the past behind my anger. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? Like think about animals, right? Out in the wild, like everyone responds to an angry animal in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Ew, dude.
Back
Yeah, I'm gonna
away
take my steps
slowly. Back away slowly, right? Or run.
Yeah. Just get out of there, though.
Get out of there. Exactly. And so, yeah, I love that. I love that you said that. And I think that that is a very resonant thing for folks to hear. Anger is what they call a secondary emotion. No one just jumps right to anger, right? More often than not, there's fear or there's sadness underneath. And so if you're hiding out there or hanging out there, a really great question to be asking yourself and sitting with is what's underneath. And also check out your attachment styles, right? Like so much of that work for me was really about understanding the very subtle ways in which I would kind of oscillate between anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. And you know, on the topic also of like kind of running away from our partners with secure attachment who are right trying to encourage healthy coping from us.
Mm-hmm.
If that's you, like speaking to your listeners right now, right? Like if that's you, like baby steps, like
Yeah.
if you're in relationship with someone who's in a secure attachment and you are not, give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
It is okay if you can't meet them and take 10 deep breaths right now. Like, what can you do?
I love that because also it is a journey. It is a journey to meet them, and it's not impossible when you don't come from secure attachment. It is very possible to develop
Absolutely.
a very healthy relationship with self and with your partner. And there was also a lot of resentment that I had. I'm like, oh, you can take a breath. And I keep refusing and I don't really know why, but I got to keep doing it because it feels better, but it feels worse ultimately. In the moment, because I'm just living in this moment, in this survival mechanism, it feels better. And yeah, that resentment piece, that's also anger. And
Huge.
I love that question that you had.
Another thing too, I think, is just pausing. You know, frequently, I think folks with secure attachment, and that really is kind of like the purpose of the breath too, right? Is it's like, let's pause, like let's maybe like anchor ourselves into some mindfulness, like let's take a moment to discharge the anger, right? But it's like, I don't want to let go of my anger because my anger makes me feel powerful.
Yeah.
And I'm holding to that because I don't like losing power, right? Then I'm vulnerable. And so when I was first going through a lot of this work for myself personally, one of the things that I wrote down kind of like in my little like home retreat space, my calm down corner, every time I pause, I'm rewarded. And it was years later that I eventually found the Viktor Frankl quote. I don't know if
I love him. Yeah.
Yeah. So he says, between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom.
And for those listening that don't know, Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. And so his story, just the purpose of life, meaning of life.
The meaning, right. He brought existentialism to psychodynamic theory. Very important.
Huge.
Yeah.
And
thank you, Viktor.
Thank you. It's God, talk about, you know, the perseverance and the kind of work he carved out. That's a really beautiful quote. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Did you have that memorized or you pulled that out?
No, I pulled it up.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
But I just shared it with somebody. So
amazing. It was a quick reference.
At the top.
I love that. And we're going in such beautiful and relevant, important tangents. And there was a piece, and the reason that we got to, well, a lot of reasons we got to where we are. I remember we were talking about this whole, my partner's asking me to take a breath. And that was your story. And then I was like, oh, I have thoughts on that too. It's happened to me. So going back to grief and trauma, these really heavy and challenging areas to start to do this work. I'm curious what recommendation, what you can offer those listening that might be holding on to a lot of this and feel like don't know how to release these mechanisms. I don't know if I'm ready for that. What can some of these questions look like and direction into healing?
You got to look at your mindset first. So frequently I have folks come in who have, quote, tried everything. I really feel like the two most important qualities that anyone, can kind of like start cultivating to take with them on this journey is really curiosity and compassion, because your inner landscape is going to be complex. You do not know what you're going to find in there. And with curiosity and compassion in your tool belt, like, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
From there, I would really just encourage folks to start looking for help. If you're going through this, and, importantly, if you're going through it alone, you're not meant to.
Mm. Yeah.
Like,
That one
I
hits
think,
too.
yeah, I think most of the time we feel like a burden, or we feel ashamed, or we feel like I should be over this already, that we are not as open in our grief as maybe we could be. And that, Brene Brown, for all of her faults, like, she's got some good things to say on vulnerability. And that's a complex topic in and of itself, right? But like, assessing safety, calling in help, calling in resources, and then beginning your journey, so that you have that ground of being, and also a team behind you, is so valuable. But then from there, I really feel like this is, it's a process of exploration. I know that I mentioned this earlier, but specifically for someone struggling with grief, I think a great question is, what is your relationship to grief?
Yeah.
How have you been taught to grieve by your parents? What did they show for you? What did they model for you? Most of us do not have great examples. And I also think that there's a lot of really beautiful room in here to explore either philosophy or spirituality, or both. The studies have shown that folks that have some kind of spiritual practice or some sort of religious belief frequently do better with grief. And that does not mean that you need to, believe in Jesus. Like, there are so many ways in which, actually coming back to Viktor Frankl and existentialism, there are so many different roads that you might walk that could help you potentially make sense of what you have lost. And also just, understanding that is a part of this human existence, right? That there is not a soul on earth that will not experience death, loss, divorce, disease.
Yeah.
They're here and they're a part of it. And that means that they're not the enemy, right? That means that if they are an inherent part of this human experience, then we need to find ways of reconciling ourselves to it, instead of posing ourselves in opposition and acting like we're the victim.
Yeah.
There's so much wisdom to be found in grief, but you have to be open to it, which is why the curiosity and the compassion.
Yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking too, it's the shift in your narrative from not being a victim, which is so hard. It's again going to what's easy and
Yeah.
almost addictive is why me? Why did this have to happen? I wasn't ready for that. This was so bad. Of course, the world hates me. All of these, and it's very easy to be in that space. And
Yeah.
grief, trauma, these are really gray areas. It's not black and white. And so dipping into that spiritual realm of all possibilities exist, all understandings, realities, kind of reframing and integrating beyond what you see right in front of you, what's tangible.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I can see why that statistic exists, that it takes a lot of shifting out of the black and white.
Yeah.
To heal the gray and to work with it. We talk about grief being a wave. It's not like something to solve and then it's done and over. It lingers. It comes at different times. It's almost like a relationship that you develop with it.
It is, absolutely. And, I would just add too that if you are someone that has grown up in an establishment, like I was raised Christian, for instance, that didn't really resonate with your spirit, and you are going through grief cycles and you're not finding it helpful, you might want to start to explore the traditions that you've inherited and make some conscious choices about whether or not they're right for you. it took me a very long time to really like understand on a somatic level that the Bible and my, my Christian upbringing, was not really helping me navigate life. And I struggled with that. I left the church that I grew up in. I left my church school that my great grandparents all graduated from that high school. My grandparents, my parents, everyone graduated from the same school, the same church school. I left it when I was 13 years old. And, it still took me another almost 10 years to actually really start understanding that like Buddhism just felt good.
Yeah.
It just felt good. It resonated. I didn't really understand until I started taking religious studies courses and then studying meditation and doing yoga that the whole notion of hell and the devil and, all of these like fantastic images that your mind produces as a result of these narratives was actually really seriously contributing to my existential angst and just like fear in the world. And questioning myself constantly of, am I a good person? Like, am I being good enough to make it into heaven? That none of that was really actually serving me. And then on top of that, there's also the whole like original sin thing, which as a woman, I think is incredibly important for us to examine. My upbringing, consciously or subconsciously, like on some level, I really embodied the belief that a woman was at fault and that like, as a result, like women are not to be trusted. And that also plays into a lot of these like patriarchy, like strategies. Divide and conquer is a strategy that has worked, and continues to work. And so we need to be acutely aware, of how these things are impacting us. And this is one of the reasons too, that I love the To Be Magnetic and the, the unblocking exercises Lacey's work is really taking you beyond cognition and into your past, into your stories and into these embodiment practices. It was through that work, that shadow work, that I started kind of piecing those things together and realizing that, in college, I was so desperate and so hungry for sisterhood. Yeah, I wanted it more than anything. And I don't think that it's a surprise that, I left the church and then kind of started going down the road of like Buddhism and karma and reincarnation. And then also like really like calling in sisters.
Just going back to how we started this conversation, I remember saying like, I'm excited for this because you do the work, and just hearing how we started this conversation on grief and trauma with curiosity and compassion. And here you are saying, it took curiosity. It also took compassion to let go of this history of look at how deep it was in my family. And the only way to really let go is to be self-compassionate, to be curious, and to keep feeding those too. So good for you. I'm so happy for your soul. It's beautiful to witness, truly.
Thanks,
and
Molly.
I have a final kind of question for you because we haven't touched on this much. We've talked about art therapy. We've talked about your personal relationship and exploration with psychedelics. I'm curious about your offerings and the work with psychedelics.
I've been working with psychedelics for, almost 2 decades now. But this last year was really like the first time that I started working with psychedelics full time. I was working at a ketamine clinic down in Sacramento, and it just became so clear that like, this is what I am supposed to be doing. And really like just watching these people come in ready and hungry, and then watching the medicine like meet them and just like help kind of catapult this. Has made me really like shift things up. So I've gone in my practice. I'm fully in my private practice now. I have fully transitioned. So everything that I'm doing is specifically aimed at trauma psychotherapy, integrated trauma psychotherapy. And I'm using ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And then I'm also focusing on psychedelic integration. And integration can be done from a therapeutic lens or from a coaching lens. But basically it's all trauma and psychedelics now at this point. And the goal is to build up the private practice. I actually just found a doctor partner who's going to potentially help me build something here in Nevada City.
Oh my God, exciting.
Yeah. But that's the next step, is creating some kind of psychedelic center here in town. And my vision right now is like part event space, part library with like a couple of rooms. Yeah.
How far are you from Berkeley?
Far.
More than 3 hours?
Yeah, I think it takes about maybe like an hour and 40, right, to get from Berkeley to SAC.
No, maybe.
I'm about an hour and 15 from SAC.
North or where?
I am directly east.
Okay,
headed into the mountains. Yeah, we're about 30 minutes.
How far are you from
Truckee.
Tahoe?
Yeah, we're about a 40
okay,
30
that helps because it's about 3.5 hours to Tahoe. Okay, that's a better reference.
Yeah.
Okay,
but you have to take a road to go deeper into the woods because we're not right off the 80. Yeah,
that sounds amazing though. you're tucked in.
It's where all witches live, right on the outskirts of town.
Well, I'm just thinking of like, okay, these events and stuff, because I'll be in Berkeley in a few months, so I'll make the trek. And the other question I had, are you doing telehealth? Is it all in person? All your clients are in California?
Yeah, all my clients are in California. All my therapy clients are in California. I can see coaching clients from anywhere in the world, actually. And yeah, currently right now I am doing hybrid. So again, like, because it's trauma work, right? Like, it really needs to be client centered. And so, yeah, if that means that you want to come in person, then I have a really beautiful, delightful office in Nevada City. And then I also do remote.
Amazing. And where can we find your information?
Yeah. So my website is meglear.com, and email is meg@meglear.com. And on Instagram, I'm Meg Lear. I'm Meg Lear everywhere. So
amazing. You're owning it. Good.
You should be able to...
Good. Yeah. That's great brand recognition. You got it. Meg Lear.
Yeah.
Lear.
Lear. Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You have so much stored wisdom in there. We're just scraping the surface. I know you could probably talk about all of this forever, and I would love to, but I'm going to respect your time.
I know. I'm sad this is over. It's been very fun.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy. And I do want to give you an opportunity. If there is something else that you want to share as we close out, no pressure on that. You can also.
Yeah. The only thing that I would probably share that's relatively new is that since I have left my organization down in SAC, a new product / offering that a girlfriend and I are going to do together. She's also an art therapist, is a psychedelic integration art circle that's going to be happening one time per month. And that will be in Sacramento.
Oh my gosh. That's really cool. That's really cool.
So it is completely integration based. And it's, about all the things that we've talked about in this episode. It's going to be a safe space for you to come and share what has happened in psychedelic experiences, how to turn the gifts of insight right into change behavior, reveal hidden blessings, and honestly, just play, just contact with the inner child.
And you just show up, all the materials there, bring yourself.
Mm-hmm. You sign up on the website, and then we provide all art materials. It's really sweet. We've got like 8 to 10 like regular participants that is really blossoming into a super sweet community. So I think we have room for probably like 15, 20 max, but we just moved location. So should hopefully get bigger.
Amazing things in the works, amazing things. And I love how you've done this integration of the modalities that have just spoken so deeply to you, and to offer that back to the world is so special. So keep doing it. And I can't wait to keep checking in and seeing how this evolves and takes shape. It's a really cool time to be speaking about all this to you.
Yeah, it is. It feels very special. Yeah. Thanks, Molly. Appreciate it. And always open to talking, whatever you need.
Of course. Oh, thank you. Well, have a great weekend, and so glad we worked through all of our technology things. Grateful for your Zoom. Bye, Meg.
Bye, Molly.